It was hard, first of all, acclimating to the job because I recognized, probably not when I was running, the awesome power that I had as a prosecutor in charge of the law, could decide what persons could be charged as a juvenile or whether he could charge them as an adult, whether to file the death penalty papers on people, and whether to charge and dismiss. And there was a lot of police brutality at that time that was taking place, and I was the law.
It's evident that he cares. What do you care about? Welcome to the Rock Newman Show. It's the Rock Newman Show.
Good evening, beloved. Thank you again for tuning in to the Rock Newman Show 2.0. I had a young godson ask me, he said, well, what does 2.0 mean? I said, typically 2.0 means new and improved, enhanced, better than before. I like to think that's where we are. Thank you so much for joining in today. I have a very, very interesting and highly esteemed gentleman. Born and reared in Washington, D.C., and has been just an absolute stalwart in this community for a very long time. His name is Alexander Williams, and he is often referred to as retired judge, retired federal judge appointed by Bill Clinton to the federal bench. I was just telling one of the participants here at the studio at 1918 Martin Luther King Avenue, We Act Radio, that you often hear that, but you don't hear that retired federal judge Alexander Williams was a public defender at one point. And that just struck me. That struck me as someone who has had experiences as on the opposite sides of the federal justice system. Judge Reading, thanks for coming to the Rock.
Appreciate it, Rock. Thanks for having me today.
Man, oh man.
All right.
I might have a tough question for you coming out of the box. This morning, I'm flipping through Facebook. It might even have been TikTok or somewhere. And there was some brother passionately stating that the criminal justice system in America was developed and continues as an oppressive tool of black people. Can you please respond to that?
Well, yes, I think, Rock, that he's right on point. The criminal justice system was developed right after slavery came into existence in this country. And to keep the slaves and black people in bonds, they developed a number of criminal statutes all over the East Coast at that time in America to, again, impose these restrictions and limitations on people of color. And it has continued through the development of this country that you've had these criminal laws that have been disproportionately applied to black people, and it's held them in bondage. And if you look at the prison system right now, it's overwhelmingly African American. We're only 12% of the entire population, but 40% of the prison population consists of African Americans, particularly African American males. And so the system has been abominable for years. And now people are beginning to question some of the aspects of criminal justice. They're getting a lot of spotlight on them. And of course, as you mentioned before, I've been in different parts of the system as a public defender representing a number of people in Prince George's County, Maryland. Then, as you know, Rock, I was the elected state's attorney for 2 terms from 1986 to 94. And then I
Against great opposition.
Yes, as you remember, the Bud Marshall, the
Yes.
guy that ran Prince George's for 24 years.
Yes.
I was able to beat him. And then I've been on the bench for 20 years, from 94 to 2014. So I've had all different angles of the criminal justice system, and my passion has been criminal justice, trying to equalize it and make it fairer from the time I taught at Howard Law School, criminal law, to what I'm even doing now in my nonprofit.
We don't play on the Rock Newman Show. Now, I'm going to tell you something. What I can promise you is that was a question that was very unrehearsed, because I only heard the brother say that today. And I'm thinking, I've known Alex. We've been acquaintances. But I kept saying retired federal judge so much. I'm like, okay, I think this is a good question to ask him. And frankly speaking, I anticipated a much more delicate answer. Brother, you hit that between the eyes with a straight right hand.
Rock, you know I'm from Northwest Washington, Petworth, and I'm one of those mighty rough riders of Roosevelt.
All right,
that's
now.
where I got my start, right there.
Yeah. Now, I talked to some of your handlers, some of your people, your PR people, and that sort of thing, appointment secretaries, and one of them was Toya. Yeah. And so I told her yesterday. I said, Judge is highly acclaimed. Alex is recognized, been given a lot of respect, a lot of honors, and all the rest. Part of what I want to talk to him about, because I want my audience to understand something, that you didn't fall out the tree and get these honors, that you might have had some of the same struggles they did. So to that end, I wanted my audience who might not know who federal retired Judge Alexander Williams is to find out who he is. So let's go back. Let's go back to the early days. Born in Northwest Washington,
Yes.
D.C. I'm even going to ask you this. What hospital? Which one of the hospitals were you in?
Garfield Hospital. That's where I was born.
That's me.
That's
me.
It wasn't but a couple of hospitals in D.C. where black folk could even be born.
I thought you might say Friedland,
right. No.
but no, Garfield.
That's
so
right.
That's where I
Garfield,
was.
right? Sherman Avenue.
That's right. Okay, so born there. And who were your early influences?
Okay, I came out of the hospital and then went over to the projects on W Street, right by Howard University. And I was very, very fortunate to be there. I met, of course, a number of my mom and dad's friends who were in that project. And my home upbringing was just wonderful. My mother was from Virginia, my daddy was from D.C., but they instilled in me.
What did they do?
Well, my daddy started off shining shoes.
Okay.
Right in front of the Navy Yard. And he had dropped out of high school and he
Sure.
was shining shoes.
Sure.
And then some of the white people enjoyed him and appreciated him and invited him in to come and apply for a job. So he did that.
Okay.
My mama was a domestic. She cleaned houses for white people in Maryland, in Bethesda.
Okay.
And so none of us had any upbringing from any college
I see.
people. That was
I see.
we all were the first college graduates in our family, but
Yeah.
well, I was really from that standpoint. But no, we were influenced by a strong family setting by mom and dad and grandmothers. I had a wonderful granddaddy from Columbia, South Carolina,
Okay.
who told me a lot of things that he didn't like about South Carolina. He said essentially black people had to work on the farm until a good while. They could only go to the 6th grade.
Yeah.
And after that, they had to go to the farm.
Yeah.
He never liked it.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to know why the white boys could go to the University of South Carolina, but they couldn't. So that stuck with him.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I had another granddaddy, my mother's side, who was an elevator operator in D.C. Superior Court, and he loved and worked for a lot of these black lawyers in D.C. Hayes and that group, George Hayes, and they influenced him. And so that's how I really wanted to study law, because of the stories he told me as an elevator operator in the D.C. Court of General Sessions. He came back with stories, and I said, my goodness, these lawyers sound great. I think I'd like to be a lawyer. So it was my grandparents and my mom and dad who influenced me a lot, and they were just regular, straight-up people who understood racism and discrimination.
What schools did you attend?
I went to, first of all, I went to Petworth.
Okay.
As an elementary school, because
All segregated or not?
it was segregated because we couldn't go to the white schools in our neighborhood. So
Yeah.
my sister and I had to walk 10 blocks,
Okay.
almost a mile,
Yeah.
to go to Petworth. Then they changed the boundary. We went to Petworth. And then after that, when 54 came and they integrated the schools, we were able to go to Joe Barnard, which was a school originally created for white people.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to McFarland, another school created for the white people.
Junior high.
Junior high.
Yeah.
And then into Roosevelt, which was right next door, where I graduated from there. And then after that, of course, a couple miles away, I just went to Howard University.
Yeah. You know what? So obviously you did Howard undergrad.
Yes.
And then you went to Howard
Law
School. What year did you go into law school at Howard?
Yeah, went to undergraduate, graduated 70, and then went into law school at 70 and finished 73. And a lot of the guys that taught me were some of the civil rights warriors.
Like who?
Like Herbert Reed. Herbert Reed was Marion Barrier's lawyer.
Yes.
He taught me constitutional law.
Wow.
And others, Genus Parks. You heard some of these people.
Of course.
They were real heavyweights, and they influenced me and drove me to be a criminal lawyer, civil rights lawyer, and that sort of thing. But these are the kind of guys that taught me.
And you, of course, coming through Howard Law School, undoubtedly you were imbued with what had been the excellence demonstrated by a Thurgood Marshall.
Yes.
And you know I've been involved in the boxing world. I'm going to tell you, man, I was so impressed one day. We were at Howard University. We were announcing a Mike Tyson fight. And they were talking about the match coming up. And Tyson said, well, let's put a pause in this and talking about this fight that I'm getting ready to have. He said, this is really child's play, because there's been fights that have been launched by people at Howard University. He said, you all know Thurgood Marshall that couldn't get into the University of Maryland, so he went to Howard University. But you might not know of the name Charles Hamilton Houston, who taught Thurgood Marshall.
Yes.
So tell me, as you're coming through the ranks, as you're coming through law school, not so far removed from those huge moments, you graduated in 73.
73 from Howard Law School, yes.
From law school in 73, less than 20 years after Brown versus Bull.
Yes.
So all of that stuff had to be just ripe. Tell me your feeling of coming through and what you felt you were getting after those giants had done so much, really, for this country, not just for black people, but for this country.
Oh yeah, I tell you, Rock, having come through Howard Law and having been taught by a number of those giants there who have taken cases all over America. In fact, Wiley Branton was the dean, and he was a big civil rights fighter in Arkansas and Little Rock and so forth.
Yeah.
But those guys really influenced a number of us students and charted the path that we ultimately would take. Just to be in a class and to admire them. One of the guys who taught constitutional law, people don't know this, but
we break news on the Rock Newman Show. People don't know this. Tell them what they don't know.
James Nabrett.
Yes.
The president of Howard University used to be, again, the dean of the law school, and he, along with Thurgood Marshall, argued Brown.
Yeah.
And listen to him teach constitutional law to me. I sat there mesmerized.
Yeah.
He would lecture without notes
Yeah.
for a solid hour.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't wait till the next day. He'd pick right up where he was. But he was just brilliant.
Yeah.
But he's one of those, along with Thurgood, that argued the Brown versus Board of Education case and so forth. These are the kind of guys that I had teaching me, influencing me. In fact, I talked to Nabrett before I ran for state's attorney. And he said, Alex, he was retired then, living on 16th Street. He said, it doesn't surprise me that all of you are doing so well now. Go forward.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Whatever they told you you couldn't do, do it.
Man, I swear to God, I was just thinking that what you all saw in addition to what was coming out of the books, and you said his lectures without notes, what you knew that they were dealing with around that time was virulent, oftentimes sanctioned racism, vicious racism, threatening racism. And you know what Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston and James Nabrett did anyhow? They went forward. So not only, I'm feeling this and I'm guessing this, just kind of hearing your passion with it, that you didn't just get what my mama would call that book learning. You saw courage in action. Not people talking, but you saw courage in action.
Absolutely. The inspiration that we got from those guys. And I'm not going to leave out George E.C. Hayes.
Yeah.
Another great one. But those guys told us things that weren't in books. Their experiences that they had to have doing civil rights cases. Wiley Branton told me, and the listeners should understand this, the audience should understand this. Wiley Branton was a great civil rights lawyer in Arkansas. He told me when he came into the courthouse to represent someone, he had to put tape on his hood, front hood, because people were bombing him. He needed to know whether somebody had put a bomb in his car. So he had, if the tape was removed, he knew not to go in it. But this is the kind of pressure that these guys had to face when they were taking civil rights cases all across the South. And it's that kind of information and passion and inspiration that caused those of us in class from the 70s to 73 to move in our different paths in our careers.
Yeah. I wrote a big C over here for courage, man, because you know, when you really think of the pressure that they were under, I mean, it could have been respectable for them to do a whole lot of other things, but they saw something bigger. They saw a promised land that they would try to help usher us into. And so what did they do? This was not just hardly a job. They put their life on the line.
Absolutely. And as students, we understood that, Rock. And they told us on day one of law school, if you're not serious about studying law, do something else.
Yeah.
And I took it serious. It didn't work. It got to school 8 o'clock every day before the class started to prepare. Yeah. And I just couldn't wait for these lectures from these greats. Yeah. So I'm just so glad that I went to Howard.
Yeah.
You know, I had applied to other schools, predominantly white schools or what have you. And quite candidly, none of them accepted me. Mm-hmm. But Howard did. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me, that I got accepted at Howard Law School. Unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. So when you finished at Howard, give us a little bit of your track there.
Yeah, finished Howard, and then was able to get a clerkship from the only black circuit court judge in Prince George's County, Maryland. His name was James Taylor.
James
Taylor.
H. Taylor.
James H.
If I
James
remember
H. Taylor. That's right. Yeah. And he continued to influence me and shape and inspire me. And after that, 1 year clerkship, went into private practice as a sole practitioner. One other guy was at Howard with me. His name was James Mercer. And he and I practiced on our own. And then in 1986, the year that the death of our Maryland guy, the basketball player, Len Bias, after he died, I ran, or during the time I was running, he died on a cocaine overdose in the campus at University of Maryland. But I ran for state's attorney, the elected prosecutor, the top job, and was able to defeat him. We brought all of the African Americans all over Prince George's County. They came together, they united, and they all got behind me, and we were able, to win that job, becoming the first African American to ever win a countywide elected seat in Prince George's County. That was '86.
What did you learn most from that job?
From that job, well, it was hard, first of all, acclimating to the job, because I recognized, probably not when I was running, the awesome power that I had as a prosecutor in charge of the law, to decide what persons could be charged as a juvenile or whether you could charge them as an adult, whether to file the death penalty papers on people, and whether to charge and dismiss. And there was a lot of police brutality at that time that was taking place, and I was the law. And most difficult cases, even back in the late '80s, was law enforcement and excessive force cases by those Prince George's County police. So I learned a lot. I learned to manipulate and manipulate and my power. And I had also been teaching at Howard Law School just before I won the election. So I was also training a number of new generation of lawyers from Howard Law School, and a number of them I brought on my staff to further integrate that office with a number of Howard lawyers and so forth. So what did I learn, Rock? I learned a lot about my power and the importance of blacks not just being public defenders, but being prosecutors, because, again, of the influence and the power. Real power was in the hands of the prosecutor.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, you just brought public defender. Was there any particular case that stands out in your mind when you were a public defender? And a public defender, you all know, a public defender, they get public defenders when you can't afford an attorney. But do you remember any particular case that you were pleased with the work that you did, that you might have seen an unjust situation that you were able to use your talent, skills, and work to reverse?
Yeah. Rock, again, I had all types of cases, murder, armed robberies, drug cases, and so forth. The evidence was so heavy for a prosecutor in most cases that all we could do was just try to get a reduced sentence as best we could. But there were a few cases that I took, went against the prosecutor and was able to convince a jury to acquit the person. And to me, that's great odds. I had a number of first-degree murder cases that I was able to get a jury to compromise down to manslaughter and that sort of thing. And people appreciate the work that I put in as a prosecutor to fight the system and do the best that you could. So I don't have the name of a particular case. I can't go back.
No, I understand.
Yeah, that was 77 to 79.
Sure. But and so what I'm trying to do is to try to get in there a little bit in terms of how people ask this question a lot. say, well, how could someone who has, outstanding ethics and morals and all of that, attorney, how could you represent someone that was guilty, or that you might have thought was guilty? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, a lot of lawyers are asked that question. How in the world can you represent someone that you know is guilty? And my answer has always been, even though they may have committed, they have rights, constitutional rights to have a fair trial. And I would always insist to the prosecutor that they must be given constitutional rights. And when you violated their rights, I'm going to challenge you. And there's a number of individuals who were dealing with drugs, but there was an illegal arrest, an illegal search, and I had the training to challenge and attack that. And once in a while, I was able to walk a defendant or two because of a bad search by a police officer or a bad stop or what have you. So I didn't get into the ethics and the morality of representing someone who was guilty. It's just that I insisted that they have their constitutional rights. There were a couple of cases that I didn't want to take. I think it was a capital punishment case. Morally, I had some problems with the death penalty at that time, being unfairly applied. So a couple of those cases I backed off. And then on some of the child abuse cases, I had a little bit of difficulty taking those cases because of my feelings for
your sense of
child.
right.
Yeah,
your sense of right.
that's right. Yeah. But by and large, we represented people. Some were guilty, some weren't. But the idea is that we were attacking the violation of the rights that those people were entitled to under the Constitution.
So, when you made that run for public office, and dude had been in, what was his name?
Bud Marshall.
Bud Marshall had been in for 24
years.
years. Can you describe the climate? Because I know, I'm growing up in Prince George's County. Around that time, a little bit later, but a little bit later when I came of age, if you will. But I know how much racism was out there. It was alive and well. Can you describe, your obstacles and how racism played a part in making your job just that much more difficult to win a fair election?
Sure, yeah. Rock, Prince George's County was a difficult place when I ran for office in 1986. You didn't have any African Americans in any of the 5 countywide elected positions, and the justice system was so stacked against African Americans. Again, the judges sentenced a lot of these guys, some of them who came from D.C. across the line, to long sentences, and the system was just unfair. And police officers did not want me to win that job. And what I did when I decided I was going to run for that job, I got together all of the community leaders, African Americans, called them to a meeting in Glenard, Maryland. All over the county, in the South County, down there in your area, Brandywine, and Oxon Hill, up the north. And my wife and I went to a meeting. I called them all together and I said, I want to run for the top prosecutor's job in this county. God been in 24 years. I need you all to be united. I know some of you are running against each other, but I need you all to rally behind me. And they did. They agreed to do it. And they told the powers that be, who was Steny Hoyer and Paris Glendening, told those people that for the state's attorney's job, we're all going with Alex Williams. Now, if y'all want political futures, you better support him. And essentially, there was a growing power of African Americans who were becoming more and more entrenched in Prince George's County, so they had to listen. So we were able to win in that environment. It was a tough environment. I'm not sure I would have beat him, but for the University of Maryland bias case, because what happened, he was in a tough race with me, but when Bias did an overdose in June of 1986, He then took that case and started teasing the press. He was calling press conferences every day, letting them know what was going on, violating his oath as a prosecutor because he wanted that publicity against me.
Sure.
And what happened, he went too far. The Baltimore Sun, the Washington Post condemned him, and they both gave me the endorsements for that. And then on election day, I was behind for a long period of time, but when those returns from the African American section start to come in, Landover Hills, Fairmount Heights, when they started coming in, I was crushing them. 9-1. And then I held my own in the white areas in Bowie and Law, and I was able to beat him by a mere 2,000 votes.
Let me ask you a question about an individual, and we don't do this that often, but I'm just curious. Do you remember if Mike Miller was he supporting you, or was he on the other side of that?
Good question.
Mike Miller was the president of the Senate like forever.
And he was like the godfather and so forth. I remember I went down as a courtesy call to his office in Clinton.
In Clinton, right there by St. John's, by St. John's Church. Yes.
I went down to him and I said, Mike, as a courtesy, I'm coming down here to let you know I'm running for state's attorney. And Mike Miller and Rock, I'm putting all of this in my my autobiography that I'm going to be completing in the next couple of weeks. And all of this is in there. The name
so
of the book,
the preview.
The name of the book is Not Qualified. And that's because the American Bar Association ruled me as unqualified for the federal bench, and I had to fight them. You remember that?
Absolutely.
But I went down to see the president of the Senate, Mike Miller. I said, Mike, I'm running for state's attorney for the county. And Miller's words to me were, we have a state's attorney, Alex. His name is Bud Marshall. What are you talking about? You're running for state. And I said, Mike, I know, but he's been in 24 years, and I'm going to take him on. And we went on for about 15 or 20 minutes. He said, no, you're not going to run. And then what he had his secretary brought her in the room and said, call Frank Santangelo, who was a delegate up there where I live, and tells Frank that he's not going to be on the ticket anymore. He's a white guy. He's going to be on the ticket. I'm putting Alex Williams on the ticket for the House of Delegates. There I said, Mike, don't do that. I'm not running.
He's kingmaker. He's trying to kingmaker.
I'm not running for, I came here just to tell you I'm running for state's attorney. And Mike didn't like it, but Mike was one of 3 senators who didn't support me. The other 5 senators all supported me. And I had so many other elected officials. Steny Hoyer supported me, and Glendenin supported me, who was the county exec, and many others. But Mike Miller didn't, because Bud Marshall was his constituent. He lived down there off of 301, as you know, in Upper Marlboro.
Absolutely.
And but once I beat him, Bud Marshall, in the primary. Then Mike Miller came on board, and Mike said, okay, when you won it fair and square, I'm going to support you in the general election, because my opponent wanted to switch parties and become a Republican. And just the sore losers law prevented that.
Being from out that way, Brandywine, my first kind of formal job, if you will, was at B.K. Miller's. Which was
liquor store.
That's right. And part of what they did is they used to have these big 40 and 50 pound bags of sugar. And I became familiar with that when I was 10, 12 years old, because my daddy used to make bootleg. Bootleg whiskey.
Moonshine, baby.
So we used to go up there. So they knew who I was when I was like 10 years old. And I ended up working there for a little bit. And, I would hear things, and later on, 15 years ago, I worked with one of the brothers, one of the family members. And, I wanted to ask you that question, because by and large, they have, Mike positioned himself, as a liberal Democrat. And, but it's an interesting family history there, which folks don't
Yes.
much delved with, that they own slaves.
They owned slaves. And in and around Clinton.
That's right.
And what is that, right by the hospital, what's that, Mary?
Mary Surratt.
Yes,
Yeah,
Surratt.
Mary Surratt.
That's where he went to school.
You know, hey, we're talking some local stuff right here, but yeah, the Mary Surratt's house is, I could throw a baseball from B.K. Miller to Mary Surratt's.
That's where he went to high school.
Where John Wilkes Booth
Yeah.
left the Ford Theater
And ran.
and took a horse down to Clinton, to Mary Surratt's house. Now the village, the area is named after her high school, Surrattsville. And on his way to Dr. Mudd's place after he assassinated John Wilkes Booth, after he assassinated Abraham Lincoln.
Sure. But Rock, I'm putting a lot of this again in my book that I'm going to get published in probably next 30 days. It's called, as I said, Not Qualified, and we'll be sending you a copy, for it. But Mike Miller ultimately became a friend. I ended up hiring his daughter as an assistant state's attorney.
Okay.
Later, when she graduated from law school.
He came on the show here. Way back, and it was right here.
Yeah.
It was right here at React Radio. Yeah.
Mike, part of what I like to do with personalities and leaders that come in like you, and folks, when I say leader, I said something earlier, Mike, that you might not have heard, but I do want you to hear what I said. And that was, you've been the president of the Maryland Senate for 26 years, and many folks say that you are singularly the most powerful politician in Maryland politics and maybe in Maryland political history. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm certainly not. There's the governor, there's the Speaker of the House, and there's myself. So I'm maybe 1/3 of the politics of the state of Maryland. I had a great honor 2 days ago. We had First Lady Michelle Obama in Annapolis, and she was fantastic. She was talking about veterans getting back into society and
Yeah. But Mike fought me at the start, before I ran, but became one of my great friends.
So tell us, please, about the process and how you first became aware that Bill Clinton wanted to appoint you as a federal judge.
Well, what happened, Rock, I had run for Congress in 1992 and lost by about 2,000 votes to Albert Wynn.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a bar association and saw Senator Paul Sarbanes.
Maryland.
And I asked him, I said, I understand there's a brand new courthouse coming up in Greenbelt, will be the Southern Division of the federal court. And he said, yeah, are you interested in it? I said, yes, I was a state's attorney at the time. And so he sent me an application, and me along with probably 20 other persons were vying for 3 seats. Mm-hmm. And Sarbanes was going to be responsible for recommending the 3 persons to Clinton. And so I, along with a Jewish woman by the name of Chasnow, and then another Jewish guy by the name of Peter Massetti, the 3 of our names were submitted to the president. And I became the first black nominee to the federal court by Bill Clinton in 1990.
Anywhere in the country or just here?
No, anywhere in the country. I was the first black nominee by President Clinton to the federal court in Maryland. Period.
Period. Right.
Yeah, period.
Right.
It just happened to be in Maryland.
Yeah.
And the American Bar Association went right after me and investigated me, and then they made a determination that I was not qualified, no experience in federal court or whatever. It just and I wasn't going to take that sitting down, and neither did Sarbanes. He said, I'm not going to withdraw his name. We're going to fight you.
Yeah.
And we fought him.
Yeah.
And I got the National Bar Association, the black lawyers around the country, to caucus and gather around, and we were able to get a unanimous confirmation by the U.S. Senate from there. But that whole thing about not qualified is the basis of my book, because I had to overcome that in junior high school when the
Yeah.
teacher said that I wasn't college material.
Yes, yes.
And then
yes.
they told me I couldn't win the state's attorney's office. when I ran.
Institutional
That's right,
bias.
that's right.
Institutional
Yeah,
bias.
Implicit, yeah. And then they told me I wasn't qualified for the federal bench. So my story and my career will be set forth in my book, Not Qualified, which I'll get ready very, very soon. It should be an interesting book, and it talks a lot about Prince George's County. A lot. That's where my entire career
Sure.
spent. Yeah.
Sure. So, I know we're running out of time. Let me just ask a basic law school or not law school question. Retired federal judge Alexander Williams. What's the difference between a federal judge? What are the roles and responsibilities of a federal judge as opposed to other judges?
Yeah, well, of course, federal judges handle federal cases, and they're in state courts. A lot of them have to run for office. They're appointed for a term or what have you. But federal judges, once they are confirmed, they are appointed for life. They have lifetime appointments, just like Supreme Court justices, and there are 3 levels of federal courts. The Supreme Court, the 9 justices. Then you have courts of appeals around the state. There's 11 of them. And then you have U.S. district courts, the trial judges, there's 10 in Maryland. And so we have lifetime appointments. We handle the biggest cases, the real big drug conspiracies, a lot of bank robberies, that's federal offense, and some other very serious economic and white-collar crimes. We have the great investigators by the FBI, the Treasury Department, Secret Service. All those police officers work for the U.S. Attorney's Office that prosecutes cases. So federal courts are a little different. Probably a lot of people would like to get that as opposed to the state judges because it's a lifetime job.
Sure.
And I had a lifetime job, but my passion to get back out here and do something in the nonprofit area caused me, after 20 years, to send a letter to President Obama letting him know that I was going to retire from the federal bench and come back out here. I started that.
Let's wrap up with this. You mentioned nonprofit, and you have tell us about the Alex Williams work and endowment, and what's going on at the University of Maryland that they've so honored you.
Rock, I retired 2014, immediately formed and established the Judge Alexander Williams Jr. Center for Education, Justice, and Ethics. And it was a nonprofit. I wanted to do things like help a lot of the inmates reentry coming back in, and juvenile diversion, a number of social justice kind of things. The president of the University of Maryland heard about it. He called me and he said, "We want your center affiliated with the academic program at the University of Maryland." And so I've been over there, ever since. But I have started, and it's doing very well, a policy center where I deal with issues of justice, disparities, health disparities, all kinds of issues that affect people of color, and challenges that they have. So my center is there. You can look it up. It's on my website, the Judge Alexander Williams Jr. Center for Education, Justice, and Ethics. And you can look at our podcast. I have a podcast, Perspectives on Justice, and a number of other signature programs that we have. And the other thing I'll tell you before, I know we got to close, we are expanding to West Baltimore. We're going to have some space in the being constructed, the Justice Thurgood Marshall Center there in West Baltimore. So we're going to be the anchor tenant over there, and we're going to expand our social justice programs to West Baltimore, which certainly has a lot of challenges, a lot of gunfire over there. You got a lot of youth that need all kinds of programs, and we're going to address that.
Folks, before I did Rock Newman Show 2.0, I used to open my show by saying we hope to inspire you with stories of extraordinary achievement. If this interview here with this man right here, who from an early age kept being told he was unqualified. He didn't have what it took to go to the next level. And you know what he did? He kept on winning.
That's right.
We want you to keep on winning and to be inspired by this story of extraordinary achievement of retired federal judge Alexander Williams. Brother, thank you so much
Thank
for
you
joining
so
the
much,
Rock
Rock.
Number Show, man.
Appreciate it.
All right,
Thank
you take care.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
Loved it.